The Crooked Epic, 1, Inn, 1, The Inn of Maniacal Madness, 5, Alex, The Maze, 5C, 2. The following day in the woods outside of the town of Hobb, Alex awoke to the sounds of something scratching at the sides of his tent. It was a light, gentle scratching, and the sunshine was a more extensive stimulation on his eyes than a noise. He rolled lazily over onto his side and tried to rest longer. There was a moment when he could almost return to tranquil dreams, where his mind went blank, peacefully empty as realization jolted unconsciousness. The soothing fur brushing lightly over his temples and the purring of a cat inside his tent finally startled him awake. Looking at the white cat, he wondered where she could have come from as he lay still in his sleeping bag. On the ground where he had found a space for camp, he had not seen any animal droppings, nor did he notice any nesting areas in the dim twilight hours which preceded. The forest had gotten dark quickly as he had set up camp up, he remembered, and the unheated cans of meat, soup, and beans were the only things he ate. Stretching, he wondered if the smell of food had attracted his feline visitor, and sat up in his tent to look around at the foodstuff. It all appeared untampered, so Alex took out a small loaf of bread as the cat sat at the door flap and watched. He drank some water, glanced at his letters to home while finishing a quick breakfast, and started to stand up afterward. Immediately, the cat stepped out of the tent, waving her tail proudly in the air, inveigling Alex to follow her. When it had left the tent, he saw her pure white coat was not dirty like a stray, so Alex idly wondered if it was someone's lost pet from Hobb or back home in Weir. As he slowly stepped out of the tent, she perched nearby on a log, laying and watching as he packed his belongings and folded the canvases. It was warming up outside and the sun was shining as Alex filled his knapsack. He took care to rewrap the silverware which had made for a useful weapon resource during his escape the day before, and returned his thoughts to sordid moroseness and morbidity when he noticed the cat yawning, stretching, and carrying on with self-cleaning and licking her paws and fur. He watched for a moment until he caught her attention, and she hopped off the log and rubbed his legs while he strapped his backpack on his shoulders. When he was ready to reach down and pet her, she ran from him toward a thick area of shrubs. She scurried under the low bushes and turned to look back at him. Alex followed, thinking that although the river was in the opposite direction, perhaps she could show him where her home was, possibly leading the way to a place where there might be better shelter, food, or safety. Alex plowed through the shrubs for a few minutes like a bumbling bear before he lost sight of the cat underneath the green foliage covering every inch of ground below him. He could not help being reminded of Buster Keaton and Go West, and his wholesome feeling obsession with his cow. Pricker bushes grew thicker and thistles started to fill his path. Spines shot sharply from leaves and thorns stuck out of nearly every branch sprouting from thin tree trunks. Then they grew thicker still until the forest became filled with thorns shooting from trees and limbs branching off brambling bushes. It was frustrating that he was too far to turn around, so he found a way to turn his back to the brambles and push his backpack against them as a shield. Turning back around to see how much farther the brambles continued, he caught sight of a large clearing. When he finally reached through the dense pricker bushes, he turned to face a hawkweed field of daisies and wildflowers. The field stretched for over a mile on both his left and right, overgrown with rolling hills and plateaus. He looked for the cat, his companion for the journey, and did not see her. However, in front of him, knoll after knoll for a couple of 1,000 feet lay between a row of evergreen pine laurels and hedge bushes which rose high atop a plateau. Around this wall of green was a cement sidewalk, a surprise to Alex, making the scene even more bizarrely out of place. So he started to walk through the weeds toward it. At the top of the first small hill, he could see a few 100 feet over the top of bushes, and it was enough to review within them distinctly inside the front row of bushes, miles of rows and columns. He had never seen something so elaborately conceived by men of plants. Yet it was also obviously not well maintained nor gardened regularly, with many segments of wild green seeming to be missing and bare. In contrast, other areas were either shortened or grew taller. When he looked around the hills, he saw the garden stretched much further to his left. Also, far out from where he stood toward the middle, a Siberian dome structure glared its staunch reflection. Coming down from the second hill, the tall hawkweed and daisies were replaced with low crabgrasses, dandelions, and nettles. The cat was rolling around the sidewalk in the sun and lay on its back as Alex continued to move toward the hedge wall. Closer to the cajoling cat, he saw behind her in the wall there was an interstice. He walked up and knelt above her as she tossed playfully to her belly, looking up. In contemplation, he stroked her fur for a while and looked into the hedges. He stood and walked through to see what was behind. There were just rows and columns, turns and paths between bushes, and he decided to try to at least walk in the direction of the structure in the middle. He still had enough food. It seemed all right to him as long as he kept walking and did not get upset if he didn't find it on the first try. The cat had given him clues to follow, and he decided to go forward and out toward the left. Surprisingly, Alex walked in the general direction he had decided to begin on, straight and left, and easily found his way through the maze. More than an hour after embarking within the outer wall of the hedges, he walked into floral botanical gardens which led to the ivied flowering and immense arched walls of the white building he had seen from the hill. Along the short steps surrounding and leading into the building were boxes of pyrocanth and sunflowers, in alternating boxes within the rings around it, with brick footpaths separating them. 12 30-foot tall and 15-foot wide pillars comprised the inner spectacular circular ciborium center of the otherwise roofless building, making it slightly reminiscent of the smaller gazebo at the small lake in Hob. This was Alex's single hint of any original purpose of the structure besides the precarious caretaking of the magnificent gardens surrounding it. It gave him the new hypothesis of it possibly being a particular type of majestic monastery within the labyrinth. In the center of the limestone building, under the giant dome, was a strange and mysterious object. A tall, brown, clay-looking box on the tiled floor, with tightly closed doors and door frames, which flushed out to the extremities of the weird box structure, and metal doorknobs on each side. From behind him, the cat burst through the garden to the door. Alex watched as she made meowing noises and scratched at its bottom and walked back to him and back up to the door. After examining it from top to bottom and side to side and testing the doorknob, he opened it. Inside was the deepest pitch-black, coy, dark emptiness of enticing blank void he had ever seen, dreamt of, nor imagined the likeness of. The cat disappeared into the darkness, and Alex stood with mouth agape, in total awe of the vanishing companion striding confidence through the nothingness within. He thought it unwise to just jump into the door without being able to see inside, so he pleadingly called for her through the doorway, clicking his tongue and making kiss noises, and tried to coax her back. When she did not return, he decided he should just put one hand into the blackness and see how it felt. The experiment yielded nothing conclusively informative, and he could still see his hand waving through the empty door frame. So he decided to move on to the next test, which was to step through with one foot. As he was moving his leg through, he saw the cat's eyes light up from behind the invisible veil of darkness, and he was warped instantly into a force of magnetic attraction into a new room. Despite the unnatural, nearly motionless movement, Alex underwent minimal physiological discomfort when he emerged inside a new room, which appeared identical in decoration and layout to the dormitory of the church basement. He saw 2 doors on either side of a tiny space only 10 feet wide. 20 feet in front of him, the wall held the same Ankh cross as the church from the graveyard near the cavern. The cat meandered slowly and gracefully, walked over to a bowl near a table in the room, and began eating a portion of cat food from the dish. Alex was stunned, but realized an opportunity might have arisen to recheck the cavern if he was nearby. He walked to the door on the right and turned the knob. Inside, there were bunk beds, the same as the church basement, and another door was on the left side of the room. He walked across the bedroom, opened the door, and saw this next room through an open door into the basement hall. The cat was still in the room behind him, so he left all doors open and proceeded to the hallway staircase. Once he reached the top, he opened the door slowly, peeking through to the back room. It was still light outside, and the rays of sun hitting the stained glass windows were enough to see upstairs. Alex held the door open more and listened carefully for the quietness of solitude before having true faith in the church sanctity, as his belief had been ruined by drinking once already.